All right, this is the start of our regular Township Board meeting for December 11th, 2017. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Cummings, Ms. McGuire, Mr. Gasky.
Here.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Nordine here. Mr. Byer.
Here.
Mr. Weed.
Here. Do we have any agenda additions?
I do, yes. The 2018 Iron Bell Trail project proposal.
Project?
Grant application.
All right. So we're going to put that under other for number 8. Do we have anything else? All right, everybody good with that? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Support.
Motion by Mr. Gajewski, support by Mr. Byer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's passed. The agenda is set. Next we move on to public comment period. Do we have any cards?
We do not.
All right, then the floor is closed to public comment. Next is closed session. To enter into closed session regarding privileged and confidential attorney-client communication to include Mr. Stalker, Mr. Eppert, and members of AKT Peerless, since they have pertinent information for this closed session. Is there a motion?
Make the motion, we go into closed session. Support.
Motion by Mr. Gajewski, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes. Motion's passed. We are now in closed session. Now we have the consent agenda. There are the minutes for November 27th, special meeting minutes of November 29th, closed session minutes of November 29th. Any questions regarding those?
I have a comment on the board meeting minutes from November 27th. It was pointed out to me that I spelled Mr. Schultz's name wrong. My apologies for that. Thank you for the heads up, so I'll make that correction.
All right, on the finance, payment of bills for $135,624.46. Any questions? Next are the reports for the sanitary sewer rate increase implementation, sanitary sewer rate seasonal credit, real estate RFP, and Audi medical tenant lease. Comments? All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
excuse me, Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, subcommittee reports and project updates. Does anybody have anything?
Just a comment on the, from the IET board, the ASCO Exploration Trail. One of the things that came up was, we met with the new fella from NEMCOG, who was at our meeting, and he mentioned that the new round of grant funding, and I see Ann has the application that has to be by January 5th. So we were considering whether or not we wanted to look at that for phase 5 for our
Right,
funding.
that's what I did as an agenda addition under the, or we did add it under other. I think.
Any other updates?
Developed by Osco is, the meeting is this Thursday morning at some point, 8:30, 9 o'clock, and I'm not sure what the location is. It might be back in Hale. I don't know the location.
And I'm meeting with the county on Wednesday to talk with them about EMS response times.
Oh.
All right, on to reports. First one is tax foreclosed property objection.
Yes, I've attached correspondence from a contractor working on behalf of the State Department of Treasury, and they forwarded a letter along with a list of tax foreclosed properties in our community. The process works such that if you don't object to receiving those properties, formally they are conveyed to the township. Staff has undertaken a review of the properties and don't find any that would be beneficial for the township to retain. In fact, as I note here, it would appear to be contrary to our property disposal desire as stated lately. So a letter has been prepared, which is attached, and I'm looking for approval to execute the letter, thereby objecting to the transfer of properties.
Comments?
Yeah, just a question, a couple. Are these properties repeating every year, or is this a fresh list?
Normally it's a new list every year.
Mm-hmm.
They go through a process before they show up on this list.
And you indicated that staff has determined that none of these are useful to us. One person? You?
Typically, I ask the assessor to flag them initially, and then she confers with me if she has any questions.
Okay.
That's how that's worked in the past.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments?
I'm just curious, what does the Treasury Department do with these if we turn them down? They
go to the land bank, Michigan Land Bank,
Michigan Land Bank?
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually auctioned off, or?
eventually. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, is there a motion?
I would move to execute the letter of objection to the transfer of properties from Michigan Department of Treasury.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Gasky?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes, motion's passed. Next, shared service contract addenda.
Yes, every year at about this time, we update our contract addenda with Oscoda Township. The addenda govern our shared service provision, and we do calculations based on the upcoming budget year's adopted numbers and update the numbers and the dates in the addenda. The contracts, I believe, go back to 1983. This has been the process for some time, with a notable exception beginning a couple of years ago of adding a calculation for the fire department equipment replacement fund. So I am seeking authorization for the supervisor and clerk to execute the contract addenda subject to concurring approval of Oscoda Township. They've been sent to Oscoda, but I don't believe they've had an opportunity to act on them yet.
Comments?
Library services, the difference was 0, am I right? Is that usually the case?
It's been the case for a long time. The millage is, well, even before that, but
Yeah.
used to be that the communities had to put money into the library to make it operational, but there's enough of a conveyance, a proportionate share of the millage that comes to us that we don't need to do that.
Okay.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I move that we go ahead and have the supervisor and clerk execute the service contract and move it ahead to Oscoda Township.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Gasky?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes, motion's passed. SRF program reimbursement and closeout.
The board will find attached to my report a request for disbursement of funds form. This is associated with the SRF revolving loan fund program, not to be confused with the SAW. The forms look almost identical, actually. This program deals specifically with the lagoon improvements that were completed a little more than a year ago now. You might recall, though, that we had some discussion earlier this spring about the fact that there was $70,000 left, and we needed a purpose-built pontoon watercraft to maintain the aerators and other equipment in the lagoons. The discussion at that time was that we should acquire that piece of equipment, which we have done. This reimbursement form would seek approval for payment out of that $70,000 approximate sum, and then presumably we would be in a position to close out the program. There had been discussion before about maybe there would be some benefit in waiting to make sure everything's functioning properly, etc. And I'm informed by our contract operator that there are no known issues on the site now. So I'm looking for approval to submit the final draw number 10 and begin the closeout process, which would require a letter accepting the project and acknowledging the construction is complete.
Just so I can understand this a little better, the 70,000, is that after the watercraft was purchased?
No, the watercraft number would come out of that.
Okay.
Yes.
Approximately 10,000.
Right.
So we're saying to the SRF people, there's 60,000 left, and we don't think we need that.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Lurich? I don't know if you want to have your conversation in the other room or not, or...
I have a question. I'm not quite making sense out of the numbers here. This document says the loan amount was $1,940,000. With the 10,000, it would put us at $1,955,183. I don't quite see how there's $60,000 left.
I'm just getting to the form, I'm sorry. So which number was in question? I'm sorry, Mr. Paul.
Well, at the top of the page, it said the loan amount is $1,940,000.
Yes, sir.
And at the bottom of the form, it's the amount incurred to date is $1,955,183. I don't quite understand how there would be $60,000 left.
Well, the 1,944,000 is the amount that's been dispersed. Oh, I see what you're saying. I will have to confer with the engineer there, because I am quite sure there was, unless there's another line item here. I'm presuming the loan amount needs to be adjusted, because even without this, we would have overspent.
Right,
Without
so-
this expenditure, yeah.
So we may have approved an additional $70,000 at some point or something, and we didn't use it? Would that be?
Well, the total loan amount, I believe, is over 2 million. That's the number, I think, that's in error.
Oh, at the top of the page
Right,
where it says,
right.
okay, all right.
Yes.
That would explain it then. Okay.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve submitting the draw request number 10 in the amount of $10,369 in acknowledgement that the program closeout process will proceed.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nardine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, tree removal, trimming, and chipper purchase.
Yes, these two are related in a strange way. We had talked previously about a tree removal RFP on an annualized basis. The original concept discussed was to solicit proposals on an hourly basis, but there was some concern that that might not get us the most cost-effective result. We had suggested that staff be given an opportunity to evaluate the situation, and we had developed a concept whereby we would solicit proposals for a defined scope of work that we believe we will need to undertake in 2018, probably actually less than we actually believe would be needed. And I've attached a list of projects from Old Orchard to give you some insight on what that might look like. So we would identify the projects, mark the trees that needed to be trimmed or removed, ask the contractors to make a site visit, and then they would give us a lump sum bid on that defined scope of work. The contractor that was the lowest bid for that work would then be our contractor for tree removal and trimming services in the upcoming year. A question was raised by our supervisor earlier today as to whether it would be of benefit, however, to ensure we have the hourly rates in the contract if we're going to approach it this way. And that would be an added caveat, I guess, for consideration this evening. That would appear to be of benefit. So with that potential change in terms of asking them to give us hourly rates in addition to the lump sum, using the lump sum then to select the contractor and putting the hourly rates then into the contract, we would like to proceed on that basis. And at the same time, we were talking about purchasing a chipper and putting together an RFP. That led to discussion as to whether the cost to purchase the chipper could be justified by the amount of use that we would have. Originally, the purchase was going to be split between Building and Grounds and the Old Orchard Park Capital Improvement Fund. In particular, the question came from Building and Grounds, geez, we don't know that we're going to use it to the extent that would justify this expenditure. So the potential solution we arrived at was maybe we should put chipping services in this RFP for tree removal. We've got a bunch of material at Old Orchard that needs to be chipped. We can see what they might charge and give us some idea as to whether that would be a better way to go longer term, because chipper's going to be about $35,000. So unless we are using one fairly frequently, it's got to be maintained, et cetera. So that is the second part of this, is deferral of the chipping purchase pending cost proposals and then evaluation further.
In addition to that, for the hourly basis, was to cover the unexpected occurrences of, we have a big windstorm we weren't expecting, trees come down, the contractor can just take care of it without having to go through a whole bidding process again.
Because there isn't something in the contract for that specific event already for a fixed price.
Right.
I see. Okay.
Yep. And this whole process was to just streamline
I got it.
tree trimming and cutting services so that we don't have to bid out every single time we got a tree that needs to be done. So we're kind of like have a tree swap going on here.
Right, exactly, yeah. Well, now it's making more sense, because I was confused why we were putting fixed bid tasks in there and then with an hourly rate. I couldn't figure out now I understand. So it's kind of like, if it's not covered by these items which we've already picked up prices on, we have fixed price agreement on, then this would be our hourly rate.
Right. And that could be another benefit for the chipper service.
Well, some other language I'd like to see in there is that we would have some sort of priority in terms of first available, as you mentioned, in the case of a severe windstorm or ice storm, where we would have trees down in streets, that we would have priority over other customers of a tree service.
Can you ask for that?
We can require it in the RFP if.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it would be in an emergency, an emergency situation.
Any other comments?
I'd be in favor of scrapping that chipper. Trying to purchase a chipper and then train somebody to operate that. Them things are dangerous. And we don't have anybody that's going to be consistently on that chipper. It's going to be you, Bob, you, Bill, take the chipper and go out and chip wood. No. I'd be afraid of that.
I've used a chipper before. It's not.
Yeah, well, I know.
But
So have I. That's what I'm
35,000
saying.
is not a high-end chipper. Professionals have chippers with diesel engines upwards of $100,000. So
Yeah, they're just high performance too.
Any further comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move to proceed in soliciting quotes for tree removal and trimming, utilizing the quote defined scope of service as outlined, along with the hourly rate and a contingency for priority for the township.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
Okay, organizational memberships. We had talked previously about memberships in two organizations, that being the Michigan Association of Planning and the Michigan Municipal League. At the time, there was some question regarding MML cost and whether moving ahead with the memberships would be beneficial. We've now received the cost to participate with MML as an associate member. It would be $3,962. The Planning Association, you might remember, is $650 per year. Now that we have that information, I bring the subject back for hopefully and potentially, I guess, final consideration. Looking for direction as to whether we want to go ahead with one or both memberships.
Comments?
Yeah,
I tipped my hat a little bit, my hand, last time. I'm having a hard time seeing why we need these. But I'm willing to listen. And there's a list of services that in the back. And Bob, you don't like to answer questions like this, but you're the guy's going to have to use a lot of this. So, I mean, are there things in here that really light your fire here? That, boy, that'd be cool to have that. Or I need to see that these things are important.
I mean, it's a value judgment, but having access to additional sample documents and some of the things that, like on the MTA website for members, would be of benefit. It's a question. There's no doubt there's some benefit there. Yeah, there it is. Sample documents, inquiry service. I guess the question potentially is the scope of services that we are going to receive here of enough breadth to justify the expense as compared to what we're already getting, and that's a value judgment. But clearly there are some benefits in participation.
I think the Michigan Association of Planning is definitely a benefit to the township. Some of the planning members do want to be a part of it. They want the training and services that they provide. The MML, I would like to see us a part of. However, there's another item further down the agenda that if that gets passed, then I don't want to expend the money on the MML, because we will expend too much money on the other item.
Well, I agree. The planning is a good for the money. It's $600 and some. But one of the benefits to that is that they will put on seminars and they will come to us, as opposed to us having to pay mileage and meals and travel. And oftentimes, it doesn't fit in for different members to travel a distance and spend a night or whatever to go to certain classes. Or if they will come to us and put on a program, and then we're here. I mean, the only cost then is the fee that they charge to come and present it. And so we could have the whole planning commission sit in on a session, or the township board to do training. I mean, I think it's a very valuable. It actually would save. I think it would save the township money, and encourage. And I think more people would attend the training classes in that vein, as opposed to traveling to different places. And now the township picks up the tab for the mileage and meals and whatever expenses are put out for members that go to these classes. So for the annual cost of $600 and some, I think I agree with Mr. Weed. It would be well worth the money to belong to that. I think there's certainly some value in the Michigan Municipal League. I'm not sure about under some of their insurance programs if there would be money to be saved. I mean, that's just something we'd have to look into. It's a possibility, because you can go into the various insurance programs under their sort of umbrella of coverage. And there were some other things when it comes to I think it was buying items and RFPs.
I was yes, they have an RFP sharing program.
Sharing, yes.
For planning and zoning, the laws, things are constantly changing with it. And being a part of the association will help keep the boards up with that. So in their decision-making, in their process of creating and changing ordinances, this will help ensure that they're maintaining the legal line that needs to be maintained. Hopefully that will also help us save money, so that, in case there was a lawsuit to come up, we're prepared. We've got things set up that hopefully prevent lawsuits from even happening.
Mm-hmm. Right. And this is the Michigan Planning Association you're speaking
Correct.
of right now.
Yep.
$650, right?
Yes, I think that's what it is.
And, one more. This, they will come to us deal, that's included in the $650?
No, there's a fee for that,
That's a fee.
but the fee would be far less than
Us
what it
going
would,
to, yeah.
sending 3 or 4 people to
Yep.
somewhere around the state.
It'd be good to have all 11 members attend these trainings, rather than it only being 1 or 2 going to an MTA training, and then trying to relay information is just not the same.
And I believe the Michigan Municipal League has the same program. I think they do,
They do on-site
they
training.
do on-site training as well, so.
What is this associate membership that the MML has? Is that their normal membership, or have they got some fancy name? There's another kind of membership, or, do you know?
Because we're a township, right?
I believe so, right.
So if we were an incorporated city, we would be a regular.
Primary or principal or I'm guessing, yeah.
Okay.
You get the gold membership.
The platinum.
Yeah, right.
Platinum.
I'm not happy with MML's annual dollar amount.
Yeah, the two of them together would be $4,612.
Yes. I find the MML's annual rate odd, just because it's not even an even number. I mean, it's like as if they tried to calculate a
What do we pay
value.
for the MTA?
5,500 or something like that, I believe.
Oh, MML's even less, huh?
But we're not an associate there.
So, what do you think?
Well, you raised an interesting question earlier in your comment about, about another item coming up later in the agenda. Now, maybe it was a mistake, but we've already agreed to the consent agenda. So is there a way we should jog these 2 items so that we can put this other larger item off to another consideration? Do we want to do that as a board, or?
I would be interested in finding out what savings would be offered in terms of our insurance if we were to, under the MML program. So maybe we could table that membership for the time being. I would like to see us pass the Michigan Planning Association. I think that would be valuable to belong to.
All right, well then I make a motion that we join the Michigan Association of Planners and that we postpone the MML membership.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, dump box bids.
Okay, first of all, there's materials on the board table that are reflective of the 2 lowest cost providers, depending on how you look at it. We solicited bids for the dump box based on delivery to Oscoda, which we would then install it in-house, or delivery by the vendor. And we have 2 different results here. Knapheide Truck Equipment is the low bid for installation. They did not give us a number with bid submittal for sending a box here. We do have that number if the board would like to have it divulged. We followed up after the fact. Truck and Trailer Specialties of Boyne Falls is, based on the bids we got, the lowest cost provider of a box shipped to Oscoda. So the question is it in our best interest to have it installed or try and do that ourselves? So to give you some insight there, it's estimated it would be 20 to 30 hours to do the work in-house. Depending on how long it took, that would be approximately $500 to $700 with labor. plus materials. And there's some question as to warranty, which we'd want to confirm if we do it ourselves. If we were to travel to Flint, if we were going to take the low bid installed at Knapheide, you have $11,124. The cost to go down to Flint, it'd take 2 trips, because we'd have to go down, drop off the truck, and then go back to pick it up, would be about $800. The preference internally, I think, is to have it installed. That way we can deal with other needs and ensure there's no warranty issues. Right. And overall, given the range of bids that we got, that appears to be a reasonable cost. So if there was a desire to do it in-house and have the box shipped here, again, truck and trailer specialties at $10,171 is the lowest number based on the bids we got. I do have a number from Knapheide to ship us one also if we wanted to entertain that, but there's no point talking about that if we're going to have the box installed.
Comments?
Well, the Boyne Falls people, that's going to involve a trip or two also, right?
Well, it would if we had them install it, but they would not be the low bid for the install.
What's the brand name of that box, Bob? This one? Henderson?
Yes. Yep. Yep. And the other one is a Crystal is the truck specialties box.
Isn't this one we had problems with rusting out so quick?
No, I don't believe so. I think I know. I won't mention the name, but it's a different brand.
Different brand.
Yes.
I can't remember the name of it either.
I think I do. But these are stainless steel also.
But that don't indicate in here. This says steel.
But what kind of stainless steel? Because there's still stainless steel that rusts.
Yeah.
Well, I'm advised that they all met the spec, so.
I think there's some value in having professional in terms of the warranty do the installation.
Absolutely.
And I have done business with Knapheide. They do a very nice job.
I agree.
They do.
Comments? Is there a motion? Anybody? A motion?
I'll make a motion that we go with Knapheide for the installation of $11,124.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, Honeybuns 2017 operating report, license renewal.
Yes, in keeping with the recreational license that we have with Honeybuns, they have submitted their year-end summary report along with payment to the township in the amount of $4,335. The current license expired in November of this year, and they're asking that a new license be issued, in this case for a period of 3 years. The one that expired covered 2 operating seasons, so it would be an expansion of 1 year. We talked a little bit at the pre-board meeting work session about the fact that they started out on an annualized basis, and it's been expanded over time based on our experience with the vendor. So I'm seeking direction from the board regarding the request for renewal, and this would be for the watercraft concession at Old Orchard Park. Any action that was taken should be subject to concurring approval of Consumers Energy, and I note that our experience with the concessionaire has been positive.
Comments?
Is it a matter of paperwork that we're saving both sides of the parties, and that's the advantage here, or what would be the overriding reason for this?
For the longer term,
Yeah.
I believe from a business standpoint, it allows him to plan more effectively for purchasing equipment and that kind of thing. The certainties of benefit to him. There probably is no huge benefit on our end, although we have historically looked at the service being available at the park as an amenity to the campers.
Sure.
Well, I'm all in favor of providing as many amenities as we can, within reason, but, you know, Wi-Fi, Honeybuns, whatever. Are you confident that the $4,335 amount to the township is accurate?
It's difficult to say. We have no reason to believe it isn't, and by saying it that, I have no suspicion that it is not, but there's no detailed accounting that's been provided.
Okay.
It's I think, above the historical norm, if you will.
How does that amount compare to previous years?
Again, I think it's elevated somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look.
Okay.
And last year wasn't one of the better years early in the season with the colder weather. And
Right.
so on.
Your motion?
I would move to renew the watercraft concession license at Old Orchard Park for a term of 3 years, subject to approval by Consumers Power.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, real estate purchase opportunity, purchase agreement.
So, many years ago, the township began a proactive strategy to acquire properties in the block bounded by Lake Street, Michigan Avenue, River Road, and the Beach Park on the east side. There are a total of 8 lots that exist west of the Beach Park, and we currently own 6 1/2 of them. Discussions have been underway recently regarding potential acquisition of a lot on the north side immediately adjacent to the Beach Park. So if we purchased the lot, we would have direct access from the properties we now own to the Beach Park. After numerous communications with the property owner, a preliminary agreement has been struck, and that would be a $64,000 cash purchase, subject to the approval of the board, as you might expect, execution of a purchase agreement acceptable to the township, and satisfactory results from environmental assessment and due diligence as deemed necessary by the township. So at this point, if the board were interested in proceeding with the purchase, the next step would appear to be authorizing our township attorney to prepare a purchase agreement in keeping with the terms I just outlined.
Comments?
At our last meeting, there were some feelers out about having a special meeting to discuss this, am I right? And Aaron and myself said we were going to be out of town. Did that meeting occur, special meeting?
Well, there was a closed session meeting that took place.
Okay. Okay. So this was talked over by 5 board members.
Well, I'm not sure we want to get into the content of the closed session.
I'm not going to ask any more specific than that, but it was, we had 5 members of this board?
We had 5 members at the closed session,
Okay.
yes, sir.
All right.
I would like to say that I am not in favor of purchasing this. The value of the property is much less than this. I don't think there's an urgency for us to spend the money on it unless it was an appropriate dollar figure. If we're looking at spending this much money, I mean, if somebody were to buy this and build a house there, I don't think it really interferes with anything. We can still develop a park around it. But if this were a reasonable cost, then sure, we can purchase it, and that might make our park a little bit better. But I think for this kind of money here, I would, if we're looking at spending this kind of money, I would rather put it into something such as our sidewalks or equipment for the DPW or something that really benefits the township. I don't think this lot justifies that expense.
I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer on this one. It's more of a judgment call. As Mr. Stalker pointed out, the township has been accumulating properties and holding on to them for some decades now, at the cost of acquisition as well as the cost of the tax roll, property taxes not being part of our tax roll. So we've already accumulated some degree of investment, whether it be our tangible investment plus also the loss of taxes that we could have had. The question, I think, really is whether or not we as a township, as a board, have a plan for the larger group of property, and if we want to do something with that. Because if we did, it would outshadow your concern. We could sell it for more and gold brick your sidewalk, so to speak. But so I don't see that that's really the issue. I think it's more of, do we have a plan, and are we embracing that plan that we've discussed, and whatever. That's the idea.
But we're on the cusp of getting a plan. I mean, right?
I would think so, that's right.
We've selected a planning organization. We're going to meet with them in the near future.
Tomorrow or Wednesday.
Yeah, so it's not like it's going to happen in 2 years or anything like that, as far as a plan for... we've just purchased the north end of the beach. To me, to be consistent, you'd want to... Here's another piece of the puzzle right there. It's not like we're buying property 6 miles apart and all over the place haphazardly. This is a...
That's right.
To me, this is a very understandable, cogent, unified plan.
Thank you. I agree.
Yeah, and I would say, but I would be in favor of purchasing this if it's with the understanding that now, since we're going to own nearly 100% of that block, that we make a concerted effort to market that property now for some sort of development. It seems as though we've owned a good portion of that property for a good many years with only some talk here and there about various ideas. My thought would be purchasing this. Now we own virtually the entire block. We can move forward with some serious development issues to find some development for that property. And I would hope that we would take that path in purchasing this property. I think it's a kind of a key piece to the puzzle for that whole area. So.
But this still leaves us with 2 private properties there.
One.
I thought there were 3.
One. Yeah, it won't be quite 100%, but it'll be...
It'll be super close.
94-ish.
94-ish?
94-ish.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
No, only that I echo Mr. Palmer that if we do this, I'd like to see us have a very well-planned, articulated plan, to be redundant, and to work that, to not let this go, and not just sit on this, like, so that 10 years from now, the previous board doesn't say, well, they had 94% of it and just sat on it.
Right.
I'd like to accomplish something with it.
I agree.
I agree, and I think that's why we hired Beckett and Rader and that's why we're meeting with them on Wednesday. Start that ball rolling.
Yeah, the value isn't just in ownership, it's in doing something with it once you own it.
Yes. So I think we should be tenacious with it too, and not let it go.
I agree.
So you want something better than a place to park the beach grooming machine, right?
Yes,
That's right.
absolutely.
Is there a motion?
I move that we go ahead with this purchase.
Support.
Do we have to do more?
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
No. Motion's passed. Next, master plan adoption process.
Yes, this is just kind of an overview of the process in terms of what we need to do tonight with the master plan, and that is, if the board finds it acceptable, the next step in the process of adoption would be to distribute the document to adjoining municipalities in Iosco County. And that particular topic is found later on the agenda.
Comments? All right, then to work session scheduling for the park design contractor.
Okay, thank you. At the October 19th meeting, the board approved a contract with Beckett and Rader to have the firm, with input from the board, complete a comprehensive development plan for the Oscoda Beach Park, Ratliff Park, and Furtaw Field. The contract includes 3 meetings between the firm and the township to facilitate that process. Based on feedback from board members and the consultant in regard to availability this week, which is the December 11th through the 15th, it appears that Wednesday, which was mentioned a couple times just a few minutes ago, December 13th will accommodate everyone's schedule. Again, the purpose of this work session is to serve as the initial kickoff meeting for the Parks project, as well as an opportunity to discuss the township's website, which is a remaining item from previous board sessions over the last few months. The time frame being suggested for the work session is 2 o'clock to roughly 4:30. The reason for the end time is to accommodate a long-standing meeting that is scheduled here at 5 o'clock. If for some reason we were to run kind of close, we could possibly, move out into the lobby area to continue with the work session. So it would, in feedback from the representative from Beckett and Rader, he suggested that we allocate about 1.5 hours for the discussion on the park. So that would leave us roughly an hour for the website. So this evening I'm seeking approval to schedule the work session for Wednesday, December 13th, beginning at 2 p.m. For the above stated reasons.
Comments? Date and time works out for everybody? Is there a motion?
I'll move as presented.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, Northeast Michigan Council of Governments request.
Okay. On Thursday of last week, I received an email from the Northeast Michigan Council of Governments, also known as NEMCOG, setting forth a request for letters of support for the Sunrise Coastal Trail Project grant application their organization had submitted to the DEQ last year. Per the information in the email, the goal of the Sunrise Coastal Trail Project is to connect communities along the Sunrise Coast, which is basically US 23 Heritage Route, with a non-motorized trail from the Iron Belt Trail that's currently underway in the Oscoda-Sauble area to the city of Alpena. Although the grant application was submitted last year, NEMCOG has indicated that representatives from the DEQ have suggested that letters of support from communities along the route be solicited for the proposed trail. The deadline to submit these letters of support is this Thursday, December 4th. In anticipation of the board's potential desire to support the project, I have included a draft letter of support for the board's review and input. I would insert, I left the name that we'd be sending it to open. I'll find out who that would be and fill that in appropriately. So, along with any other changes the board deems necessary.
I'm glad to see movement on that portion of the trail. If that goes through, that would make Oscoda and Sauble a hub for recreational, pathway recreation. That would be pretty significant for us.
That's very cool.
And what phase would that be from F41 down to Mill Street Bridge?
That's not part of the IEP.
What am I missing about the date here? deadline is December 4th.
14th.
Oh, yeah, I might be missing one.
Just a
Yeah.
typo.
Yep,
Okay.
sorry. Yeah, we're late.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve submitting letter of support for the Sunrise Coast Trail project.
Support. Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Weed.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, resolution 2017-30, fiscal year budget amendment number 2.
Yes, lots of budget amendments here. Just by way of brief comments on a few of them. Fund 101, which is the general fund. We did receive cable franchise fees, so our first installment there has been accommodated. We took out the GIS base map creation. That's being carried over to next year, you might remember, so there's a corresponding decrease in beginning fund balance. The fire department equipment fund had a substantial adjustment in the equipment replacement line item, $223,000, due primarily to the fact that the tanker came in this year versus 2016 as originally budgeted. It was carried over. Fund 218 was affected significantly by the Old Orchard Park boat launch project, both being implemented this year and at a cost that was higher than we originally anticipated. The property O&M fund, that would be 236, was impacted significantly by sale of the commissary building, $622,000 we didn't count on. That's a good impact. But that wound up with an ending fund balance then being created of $381,000. In terms of the sewer fund, that would be 590, jumping ahead a little bit here. Not as much of the SAW program was going to be implemented in 2017 as anticipated. We were conservative, so there's a $50,000 reduction in the grant amount and an offsetting reduction in engineering fees. And then finally, in the water fund 591, and also in the sewer fund, there's contribution to public improvement, water and sewer. That is primarily for the backhoe. It was in capital improvement line item, pulled it out because it ultimately was going to the public improvement fund. And then finally, there's a significant reduction in capital improvement and outlay in the water fund based on the water main project taking place next spring as opposed to this fall. So, in a nutshell, those are what I would consider to be the most significant changes.
Comments? Motion?
Yes, I move that we go ahead with resolution 2017-30 regarding budget amendments number 2.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky. Yes. Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, Township Board meeting and pre-meeting work session schedules.
Yes, I put together the required posting for the regular scheduled meetings this year. It's required the addition of the work sessions we hold on Fridays to prepare for the board meeting, so it looks a little different than years past. And with that, originally I only had 7 p.m. start time for meetings. I've changed that to specify 7 p.m. for regular board meetings, 9 a.m. for work sessions. So.
Questions? Motion?
I move that we accept the clerk's public notice as stated.
Support? Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, authorization for payment of bills for December 27th of 2017.
Yes, we do not have a second meeting scheduled this month, so it's been standard practice in the past to get the board's authorization to pay bills so that we don't have delinquent accounts going into the new year.
Don't have that on my agenda.
Comments? A motion? I make a motion, we go ahead and make payment, do payment of bills for December 2017th of 2017.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, Planning Commission appointments. We have 4 members that are coming due the end of this month. The dates that are listed on this chart are done in a way that re-staggers everything so that we don't have a whole bunch of people come up at one time the next time. We've already talked with everybody and they're all willing to renew.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
Do we need to do them individually?
Probably a good idea.
Yes.
Yes.
And just for purposes of record keeping, it'd be good if the motion said expiration dates, so that anyone looking back in history has it clearly spelled out.
Okay. I move that we extend the term for Mr. Dan Gary till December 31, 2020.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes. Motion's passed.
I'll make a motion that we reappoint Rhonda Cope to the Planning Commission with the term ending December 31st, 2019.
Support. Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. I make a motion, we reappoint Robert Taser, expiring December 31st of 2020.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Anybody else want to do the next one?
I'll move we appoint Mr. Michaelis to term ending December 31st, 2019.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Now for the Zoning Board of Appeals, we have 2 members that are renewing.
I'll make a motion that we reappoint Irene Dunn to the Zoning Board of Appeals with the expiration date of December 31st, 2020.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
Move that we reappoint Joanne Nink to the Zoning Board of Appeals with the term ending December 31, 2019.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, GAC plant location
I
revisited.
you have one more member on here. That
No,
does-
those are the ones that accomplishes all the
Okay,
requests.
all right.
GAC plant location revisited. So I have 3 items on here. I guess I don't know if anybody has any further comments regarding this. If they do, then please just stop me. But I'll go ahead and press on if that's good. All right. So I make a motion, we establish a storm sewer system usage for processed water with a rate structure.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Did you say that's an ordinance, or is it just a,
Ordinance.
okay.
Yep.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes. Sorry if it might seem a little out of order. Second one I have is to make a motion to approve, that we approve of usage by the Air Force by one of 2 properties. The first preferred property is the one by the tennis courts. Is there a number for that property?
It ends in 007. The one that the treatment facility is on ends in 007.
Okay, so primary property for 007.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Secondary would be 024.
25 is what they asked for.
It's 25?
It's 025 is what they asked for.
Yeah.
Is their
This one?
preferred.
It's split, they,
Yeah,
Oh, I thought it was
024
this
is the
one.
one, yeah.
their interest is in both, or just the one?
The information they just sent us is 025.
Okay.
Okay, so secondary for property 025.
Support.
Hold on here, I'm sorry, I had 2 other items here. In addition to that, the conditions are the Air Force removes all infrastructure above and below ground when remediation is deemed complete. And the second is that the Air Force will contract to pay a monthly rate if they choose to use a stormwater system.
Is that your motion?
Yeah, is that correct?
Support.
Okay, I want to make sure I've got everything.
I thought you were gonna
correct on that.
do 2. Okay.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I'd just like to point out that the Air Force was here recently to do their semi-annual or however cyclical town hall meeting to give updates, and there were more developments in that time, things that we've been at this process of hammering out where the SCAC facility is going to be located for some time now, and things changed as recently as last Thursday. I just hope it's recognized that we are doing our best to reach a compromise here. The amount of time and effort and discussion that's gone into this, I hope, is appreciated. I don't know that it's readily apparent, but it's happening. I just want people to know that we are trying to help us recognize that we are trying to make this work. And this is I don't know what number iteration of this deal, but at the tail end of last week, I was quite frustrated with how everything's going. The weekend was good for me, cooled off a bit. But I encountered some of the disingenuousness that Mr. Cummings has pointed out. And not that I was skeptical of that before, but I have no avenue but to just recognize it now. So I just wanted to get that off my chest, that this has been incredibly frustrating. I just want this to be done with. I want the groundwater to be remediated. And it's been a disheartening process, and I hope this is the end of it and we're moving forward.
Well said, John.
Thank you.
And it's up to you to get all this in the minutes for this. Word for word.
Do my best.
Thank you, Mr. Nadine. I wanted to just mention that it's it's frustrating to be as active as we have all been in trying to make this all been moving forward since for years. But when we get pointed at by the Air Force as being the reason why their building project can't begin or it's delayed, it's ridiculous. So I think we made that point very clear, and I think a number of people in the audience took heed of that and commented afterward that they were surprised that that's been the case.
Yep, I agree completely. It's all very well put. This is interesting play, but I think this new plan they laid out here, I think is a very good one. I think it'll help out with their expansion. So hopefully they'll play nice with us and get this thing going so they can take care of our water.
I agree.
All right, so is motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next one I have is I make a motion that the city sewer to conduct a storm sewer analysis at the discretion of the superintendent in a value of no more than $20,000. And this would pertain to the storm sewer portion of direct outflow from the Air Force treatment facility.
And what is the frequency of that evaluation?
This is just an initial one-time.
Initial.
Baseline.
Yeah, baseline's a good term.
I'll support that motion.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, draft master plan consideration.
Yes, in keeping with my earlier comment, the board members have all been provided with copies of this document in paper form. It's been available on the website digitally. The Planning Commission has spent a lot of time and effort in developing the document in cooperation with a consultant. And I believe we are now in a position, absent concerns from the board, to move forward in considering adoption of the document. One thing I noted in my report that I didn't mention earlier is it's the intent of the Planning Commission and the consultant to change the year to 2018, since that's when it will actually become effective, thereby sort of stretching the time frame out to our benefit moving forward. But for purposes of starting the process this evening, if everybody's comfortable with the document, the board would approve distribution to Oscoda County and adjoining municipalities.
Comments? Do I have a motion to approve distribution of the master plan?
I'll move.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Cummings. Go roll call.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, zoning ordinance 165 amendments.
These are being forwarded from the Planning Commission. They are, as I understand it, intended to be responsive to implementation of the Medical Marijuana Facilities Act and the ordinance that we recently adopted. The changes are highlighted in yellow, generally identifying special uses within the various districts. The ordinances have been reviewed by the Planning Commission, subject to public hearing, and they're being brought forward for the board's consideration this evening.
Comments?
I would just point out, just for the board's information, that these are added to Ordinance 165 as a special land use, and what that means is that any activity that would happen under that guise would have to come before the people looking for any site plan or anything for a development would have to come before the Planning Commission for approval. That's a difference in the zoning ordinance, is that in each district you have two primary things. There's a primary use and then a special use. As an example, in the R1 district, what would be allowed is residential housing, of course. And so if somebody bought property and they wanted to build a house, it would be approved because that's a primary use in that district. If someone wanted to build something other than what was allowed as a principal use, but it was listed as a special use, they would have to come before the Planning Commission to get approval. And this is the same process. And we put all of the medical marijuana facilities under special land use guidance, not a principal use. So they would have to come before the Planning Commission to be approved for each site development, just for clarification purposes.
I have a clarification on number 3 under the special permit uses where the yellow appears. Is the, I believe it is a mistake in the ordering identification here. When you get to X, Y, Z at the end of the alphabet, and we start to then use double letters to go into the next, what's beyond Z, the next one would be AA, but the next one would then not be BB that I'm familiar with, because I don't understand how this would go. Wouldn't it be AB and then AA, AB, AC, AD? I don't quite understand how this numbering system works. And if this is a traditional for planning and zoning, or if this is just a typo.
In which district are you looking at?
I said number 3, and the only section of 5 rows in yellow.
Just before number 4.
Just look at them. Yeah,
In the industrial district, Wordsmith Industrial?
Looks like page 113.
Yeah.
Oh, I see your point.
Because if you look at the industrial district,
I can't get a page number. I have no idea.
under principal uses, it has AA, BB, CC, DD, EE, FF, GG.
Right. Exactly.
So page 114. I guess I don't see what the question is.
On that page, are you using double the same letters? Is that the correct order that it's supposed to be done? Or should the ordering be, instead of AAA, BB, it should be AB, AA, AB, AC?
These are all under the principal uses. None of those are changing. That's what exists in the ordinance.
It's about
now.
the numbering going down the sides. The
Left-hand
letters
side
used to go,
numbering.
the letters to order them.
I mean here?
Yeah, these here. Is that the correct way? AA, BB?
That's what's listed in our ordinance now. This is under principal use. This isn't going to change.
So that wouldn't be AB and AC?
No. This is the way the ordinance is written now.
Okay, so it's supposed to be ordered like that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, any other comments? Is there a motion?
I will move to amend ordinance 165 for the special land use in the sections as stated.
Support. Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, DNR Bike Path Grant.
Okay, thank you. At the pre-meeting work session, sorry, I'm never sure what to call that, last Friday, as Mr. Palmer mentioned, he brought some information from an NEMCOG representative that said that there was gonna be another round of grant applications for the 2018 Iron Bell Trail. And that deadline, and these are planning grants, basically for the Iron Bell Trail. The deadline to submit an application is January 5th, so based on the fact that we don't have another meeting coming up later this month, he suggested maybe adding it to the agenda. So I did find the grant application online. It is very, almost identical, similar to the grant application we submitted a couple of years ago where we got the grant funding for, not really sure what phase that was, sorry, phase 3 of the project. So basically, this is a planning grant. We'd be looking at it for the next phase of the Iron Bell Trail, which is basically from Old Orchard Park west, and I think you identified that as phase 5. So I did not find confirmation that the match was still the same 10%. I have a question into the grant agency to make sure that that's true, but I'm assuming that it's a 10% match. The maximum we can ask for is $30,000. So I guess I'm not sure what the cost is, you know, from somebody to do that, but we'd be looking to do a grant application at the maximum of $30,000 with a, you know, if it's a 10% match, then a $3,000 commitment. So I'd be looking for the board's interest in submitting a grant application.
There is no required match for this grant, but it does, I believe, help in their scoring of grants. So I think in the past we did $2,000. I think that's what Mr. Byer
Yeah, I believe 2. I'm not sure.
I think it was 3. I think we got 27,000. And we put in 3.
Okay.
I believe. So that'd be a 10%. 10% match.
That's what we did on the last one. I didn't know if it was a requirement or not.
So you need a motion to go ahead with the application?
To work on the application, correct, if the board's inclined.
I move that we do that with a 10% donation from us.
Match.
Match.
Support.
Not a donation.
Yeah, couldn't do that.
Good cover.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
Thank you.
We are now on to our second public comment period. Anybody may speak. There's a 4-minute time limit. If you come to the podium, please introduce yourself. Does anybody wish to speak?
Hello, Kathy Woosterbarth. A couple questions about the property, the beach property, which I'm great. I think it's great that you purchased that, or you're creating a purchase agreement, right? That was the motion. I'm wondering about what fund those purchase dollars will be coming from. If you could address that for us.
The general fund.
The general fund.
Yes.
Okay. And we talked about the property operations and maintenance fund had a $381,000 balance for 2018. That's what we were looking at.
The ending, well, it has a larger cash balance in that. That's how it wound up the year. That's what went into the fund balance, or retained earnings.
All right. So I just wanted to point that out in terms of a fund balance for that, property O&M, and if we were looking at any other purchase property, would we be able to derive it from that fund for additional purchases?
Not unless it's in that area, not unless it's in the property O&M area.
Okay. I wanted to address the the statement that was made in terms of proactively purchasing property, you know, in that the blocked area, right, I think, which was mentioned somewhere in the agenda today. I didn't see that in our Parks and Recreation master or plan or our master plan in terms of purchasing property. Is that, did I miss that in terms of the planning of those two documents?
We'll get back with you on that one.
Okay, because those are, you know, we already finalized the Park and Recreation plan, and then the master plan is now, you know, in works and in finalizing that. So if that is definitely our proactive approach, then I would think we would want to work that into those documents.
I think it's in our goals and objectives, if I believe.
Well,
I don't think it directly says purchasing property, but I think it's addressed in the goals.
it has been in the past, and I think I'm the one who said proactive in my report. And I'm referring to historically, not that we couldn't do it now, but there was a very aggressive, deliberate effort back in the mid to late 90s, I believe, to acquire those properties.
Well, I do support the, you know, aggressively purchasing those properties at the costs that are established by those owners, because that, I do believe that it is, you know, provides value for that park in general. So I wanted to make sure that that was known. And I do believe that many residents believe the same thing, so.
Thank you.
Two questions, same subject, but I'm going to start with, as a citizen, Ani LaRich lives in Oscoda. My comment on this is I fully appreciate a lot of the frustration that you've said tonight and certain members of the board have expressed, such as in the public meeting and everything. Similar frustrations I had 3 years ago when I was listening to what the Air Force and the DEQ and the Township were saying or not saying. A lot of times it's not what's said that you have to worry about the most. So that's why I got involved and I studied it, researched it, and then I approached the board twice in public meeting, and then the Air Force and the DEQ and other members twice in the public meetings. And then I started to get really serious, and I was fortunate that I did have some sympathy with what I was saying about establishing a RAB, and I appreciate the Township taking that letter and submitting it to the Air Force and having approval and so forth. And our first official meeting was November 1st. So I really appreciate that. That's my comment as a citizen. So thank you for that, and I am fully behind you and with you on the frustrations dealing with federal state agencies. And I have some experience in doing that from both sides of the table. The next comment I'm making is as the co-chair of the community side of the RAB. When I was listening to the comments at the RAB meeting on November 1st, I started to get a little concerned that communications didn't seem to be forthwith coming between agencies down and from some of the other members of the RAB up. And what I mean by that is, and it was really evident during the public meeting, and because there was a lot of heat, a lot of frustration on a couple topics, and probably necessary. However, when I went to, and I was invited by the Air Force to go to a meeting on Thursday morning, and that's when I started to feel that I was understanding some of the details that were missing. And that one of the details was the November 3rd letter that the DEQ had issued the Air Force talking about enforcement and compliance. And I'd like to know, were you copied on that? Was that sent to you by email or any other way? Never did. Okay. That is totally unacceptable by the DEQ. And I hope that you will push that upon that state agency to communicate
Yes,
that.
we have.
I will, and I did by email that same day, send it to the DEQ, and I'm going to follow up to make sure that those DEQ managers that signed it and were at the meeting will get an email directly from me as the co-chair. Secondly, the DEQ said on Thursday that, not the DEQ, the Air Force said the DEQ took off the table their ability to look at groundwater injection. And I know that you don't want, or did not want, sewer hookup, the storm sewer. That changed it too. So I asked the Air Force, did the DEQ put that in writing to the Air Force? They couldn't come up with it. Did you ever hear the DEQ say that to the Air Force? Or did the Air Force say that prior to the 2 letters that the Air Force sent you? So I really think that communications is key, and I hope that you will use the RAB as what it's meant to do, and that is to get all parties working together and communicating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? All right, and we're on to board comments. Does anybody have anything? Yes.
December 12th, tomorrow, I just want to remind everybody that the board of review is in the assessor's office tomorrow. If you have any questions about your assessment or your tax bill and how it's calculated, you might want to stop in and talk to them. Also, December 25th and 26th, the Township offices will be closed for our Christmas Day and Christmas Eve Day, and we will reopen on the 27th at 8 a.m.
What's the situation as far as licensing and so forth regarding medical marijuana? Is that any schedule for that? When does it start?
I think the 13th, we're going to be accepting applications. We have a process that's been advertised.
This month, the 13th?
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
I think the 15th is day of submission, is that right? The day they can submit the application?
They can submit to the state for a state license.
Okay.
We are going to give out our applications on the 13th.
Yeah.
'Cause that's when the law, technically, under the law, on that date.
Second item is, we had an Oscoda resident, maybe now living in Tawas, that was on Wheel of Fortune and won. Bobby Peacock, and did win just in recent days. From what I didn't see it, but from what I hear, he kind of drove Pat Sajak nuts, correcting him as he used to do to me. But anyway, he won a sum of money and a nice car, and yay, Bobby Peacock.
And a trip to Hawaii.
Did he?
Yeah, I watched it. He dominated that thing. It was awesome. Yeah.
That's what I heard. He just,
That's great.
even to the point of correcting Sajak's pronunciation of Tawas.
So that's funny. Good.
Anything else?
I would just like to wish the community that supported us over the year happy holidays, being this is our last meeting, and hope to see you in 2018.
You're here.
Absolutely.
All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Can't take my badge.
Thanks for coming out.